Action Comics, Superman and the Men of Steel, written by Grant Morrison with art duties by Rags Morales and Andy Kubert, is, frankly, a disappointing mess. I think it's safe to say that part of my disappointment with this book is due to it simply not meeting the expectations I had for it before reading it. If you expect a book to be one thing, and it ends up not being that one thing, or not even intending to be that one thing, then it's not really fair to judge it harshly because it doesn't measure up to your expectations. But nonetheless, this book does fall short because it doesn't measure up to my expectations. It may not be fair, it might even be mean-spirited, but it is how it is. And even if I tried my best to cast aside what I wanted to see going into this book, I just don't find anything about this book very redeemable. At almost every turn, I find myself wondering why the creators or the editors did the things they did. Why do we have Inspector Blake serving as the principal police officer character when we have Dan Turpin and Maggie Sawyer that we could have used? You know, actual characters from Superman's supporting cast. Why is the B-villain of this book a Mr. Glenn Morgan, who owns a television company and has mob ties, when the creative team could have gone with Morgan Edge, a character who has had mob ties and owned a television company in past versions? Before I go any further into complaining and ridiculing this book, I should mention that I do not know who is to blame for the things that I don't like. It's no secret at this point that the editorial behind DC's New 52 relaunch have been doing everything they can to stifle the creators behind these books. Names like Rob Liefeld, George Perez, John Rossum, Gail Simone, and Scott McDaniel have all talked about how it was a bloody nightmare working on the books of the New 52. Essentially, editorial was always backseat driving, approving a script and then later ordering changes on the same script at inappropriate times, not telling creators about the plans of other creators that would interfere with their own books, etc. Even Grant Morrison, who is something of a giant in the comic book world, you would think that he would have the clout to be able to do whatever kind of story he wanted to do without editorial micromanaging every aspect of his work, like they seem to be doing with everyone else working for them. So basically, what I'm saying is, I don't know if this comic book is terrible because Grant Morrison wrote a terrible comic book, or if it's terrible because his bosses turned a decent comic book into a terrible one. But regardless of who is to blame, the fans suffered, as I will go into much detail explaining. First, I will explain what I was expecting when I went into this comic book. Imagine, if you will, that it's the summer of 2011, and the comic book fan community is buzzing about what they think of the announcement that DC Comics will be rebooting their entire universe and starting every title over at issue 1 near the end of the year. We've been told that Superman will have 2 comic books, Action Comics, written by Grant Morrison, and Superman, written by George Perez. Action Comics will feature Superman at the very beginning of his career, rough around the edges, more violent than we've seen him in the past, and essentially a vigilante who doesn't follow the law and the law is after him. The Perez Superman title will feature what looks to be a more kind-hearted, gentle Superman 5 years after the events of Morrison's Action Comics. This Superman would much more closely resemble the Superman from before the reboot. This is what I was expecting. This would have been an amazing idea. Show us a Superman who acts nothing like Superman, and show him gradually turning into the Superman we all know and love. You know, like if Smallville was good. And this book actually starts in that place. But instead of slowly showing this brat gradually growing into the more mature, thoughtful Man of Steel, it happens in the blink of an eye. In fact, instead of being about Superman's growth into a different kind of superhero, this book really seems to be more about the origin of different things in Superman lore, as per the New 52 relaunch. We get the origin of Metallo, we get the origin of the Fortress of Solitude, and we get the origin of the weird chameleon armor that Superman was wearing in other New 52 books like Justice League and George Perez's Superman. Apparently, when Morrison was offered the job of writing Action Comics, he pitched it as a young, brash Superman who wears a t-shirt and blue jeans. Dan Didio responded by telling him that he couldn't do this because Jim Lee had just designed a new armor suit that Superman would be wearing. So Morrison then asked if he could show how Superman got the suit. Editorial mandate at its finest, ladies and gentlemen. Let me make this clear. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm going to go ahead and make a sweeping statement. Nobody is interested in where superheroes get their clothes or costumes. This is why the origin of Barry Allen's bow tie in Flash Rebirth is stupid. This is why the origin of Wolverine's stupid jacket in X-Men Origins Wolverine is moronic. And to devote an entire volume of Action Comics to where Superman got that armor, also really dumb. I get that Didio wants to kiss Jim Lee's butt so that he could have Lee doing the flagship title of the relaunch. But why did this Superman armor have to show up in Action Comics so soon? If this book is set 5 years ago, and books like Justice League and Superman are set at some point after the fact, then why can't Morrison wait until the end of his run to introduce this new suit? If nobody cares about where this costume comes from, then you may be wondering why I'm spending so much time talking about it. For some reason that is unknown to me, as soon as Superman ditches his plainclothes look, his personality changes as well. I'm not even sure what's going on with the main character of this book. Is he actually an arrogant brat trying to fight the corruption in the city like a vigilante, or is he just pretending to act that way? If he really is that way, then why does he suddenly stop acting like that once the people give him the key to the city? It isn't because Glenn Morgan has been exposed by Clark's reporting. That has happened, but you can't tell me that Glenn Morgan was the only corrupt person in this city. Heck, why is Clark only focusing on Metropolis? Why not use his hit-and-run tactics on warlords and fat-cat corrupt politicians in other parts of the world? If the main character of a book is a mystery to me and I cannot answer any of the questions about him, then why should I buy the next book? Superman isn't the only character in this book who is a mystery to me. I am completely befuddled by Lex Luthor here. For most of the book, he's got this arrogant genius thing going on, which is great, because I like that about Lex. But then he's also as cowardly and inept as the Luthor from the animated DVD Brainiac Attacks. And by the time part of Metropolis is shrunken down and bottled up, I'm assuming that Luthor is lying to Lois about where his allegiances lie, just because he is incompetent enough to get stabbed in the back by Brainiac, and I guess he doesn't like that he was outsmarted. And then in the final pages of this story arc, before the book devolves into true stupidity, we find out that Lex Luthor has been supplying Clark Kent with anonymous tips so that Clark could bring down Glenn Morgan, even though Lex was working with Glenn Morgan at the beginning of the book, so that Lex could capture Superman for the military. And then Clark Kent bizarrely asks his unknown informant if he is Superman. I'm not even sure if the people who created this nonsense know what this is supposed to mean, so I won't spend much time trying to figure it out. On top of all of this, I just don't feel like there's anything fresh here. Superman as a social crusader, that was new and innovative back in the 1930s. Brainiac being responsible for the destruction of Krypton, that was used in both the animated series and in Smallville. Morrison devotes an entire issue to the destruction of Krypton, even though he is criticized spending so much time on an origin that everyone on Earth already knows. His reaction to the Superman origin getting recycled so often is the genesis of the 8-word, 1-page origin recap in All-Star Superman. And yet here, we see that apparently Morrison now thinks that this origin, still not much different than what it was before the relaunch, is worth an entire issue. In 2006 or 2007, Morrison talked in interviews about his approach to Batman, which at the time he was just beginning after Infinite Crisis. He saw every Batman comic of the past as being all part of a timeline that took place over the course of 8 or 9 years, and then this informed how he wrote the character in his own run. And while this approach worked fairly well for Morrison on Batman, at least I thought so, I feel like it isn't working nearly as well for him on Superman, if that is what he's trying to do. And I can only assume it is, since he's taking different elements from past Superman stories from other media and trying to make something new out of it all. But it just feels like it is retreading all that has come before. On the rare occasion that Morrison does try something new, like saying that the internet was Brainiac in disguise, it falls flat. If this book does take place 5 years ago, let's say that puts it at 2006. Why would Brainiac wait so long to make his move and shrink part of Metropolis? As far as I can tell, Brainiac's modus operandi is still the same as it's always been. Collect cities from planets and then destroy the planet so that the city becomes a rarity. But as far as I can tell, the plan to build a large-scale computer network began in the 1960s. So why would Brainiac wait 40 years to decide to take Metropolis and then destroy planet Earth? After Superman defeats Brainiac, this book becomes the picture definition of a non sequitur. We get some highly unnecessary backup stories about Jonathan and Martha Kent getting married and trying to have a baby, and some stories about John Henry Irons fighting in Metropolis while Superman is in space fighting Brainiac. These short stories are not bad or anything like that, they just aren't really adding anything at all to the narrative. And we also get what I feel is maybe the worst part of this entire book. We have a story that I'm not even sure I can describe. 3 members of the Legion of Superheroes and Superman from 5 years in the future come to the past, shortly after Superman of this book has defeated Brainiac and turned it into his Fortress of Solitude. Apparently, the fortress has been poisoned thanks to a group of villains who I guess have been gathered by Mr. Mixia Spitlick for some reason that is unclear in this book. And the Superman from 5 years in the future and the Legionnaires, apparently, they have to stop this because the Superman of this time period is incapable of doing so himself. And really, it's much more complicated than it needs to be. Since this is a reboot, why not just cut all of the stuff with Superman from 5 years in the future, time traveling to this point in time, and let the Legion of Superheroes come to this point and meet up with Superman from just a few weeks after he defeated Brainiac. This would cut all of the headache-inducing nonsense that makes my mind melt, and you could just tell a straightforward story with no problems at all. There is one exchange toward the end of this story that I really liked. It is when Saturn Girl tells her friends that when they first met Superboy, they weren't impressed by him at all, but he was impressed by them, and he strove to become the hero that they knew him to be historically. This is actually a neat concept, I think. And it could have been the crux of this whole relationship between Superman meeting these 3 members of the Legion for the first time, while they are all trying to stop Brainiac from resurfacing. Instead, this one neat idea is lost in the nonsense that is the entire collection of issues. Before I give my final verdict, which you can probably guess right now, I do want to say that I really wanted to like this book. Anytime I give a negative review of a book, it's not because I'm seeking out bad comics and I'm finding joy in reading these things. As I already said, I came into this with high expectations. It gives me no joy at all to say that this book was nearly an incoherent mess at its worst and uninspired at its best. Ultimately, this book is highly skippable. If you are a new comics reader and you thought the New 52 was going to be a great place to jump into Superman, I would caution you to skip this book. It's not worth your time and money, and it especially comes short when you hold it up to other Superman origins of the last decade, and other works by Grant Morrison as well. I, for one, will not be continuing with this series until the next creator comes on after Morrison. I hope then that I can find a creator who will make me want to like Superman comics once again. Until then, I'll see you guys next time, and I hope this review was helpful for you.